We have lots going on in the Raleigh garden this morning, including, you can see the tulips are in full flower. They're full glory right now. We've got some daffodils that have passed flower, but some that are coming into bloom that we'll talk about in this video. A little bit of pruning. We're going to create a couple new plants, show you an awful weed, and several other things that are in flower this morning. So we'll jump right in. These Shocks and Struts tulips from Color Blends are kind of peak right now. It gets hot here pretty quick normally, and they burn out really quick, but we've been super lucky here because it's only like, I think the entire week it's like 70 degrees for a high, so we should get a little bit of more life out of our tulips than we normally do. If it jumps up to 85 real quick, it just burns them out. And you can see the purple hyacinths down at the bottom of them, framing this little entryway into the garden. We have other annuals that we've started from seed that are outside now in trays. That will be taking these spaces and outlining these garden paths for later this spring. One thing, we've got this, there's several shrubs in the garden that sucker, and a lot of folks have sometimes suckering shrubs to the point where they're just colonizing and taking over a big place, and it's not fun at all. But occasionally you get a plant that's not a crazy colonizer, but it happens to lay down a limb somewhere, and you're able to cut that away from the plant and detach it. So you may, if you're looking around your garden, I always talk about, when you're looking around your garden this time of year, you're looking for invasive weeds. As you're out there, mulching and doing all the chores and cleaning up and getting up whatever you're doing in the garden, you also have the opportunity probably to create a few new plants this time of year. We have this variegated deutzia out here in the front foundation. It's about to bloom. Really pretty plant. It's taken a couple years for it to really come into its own. This little bed has been created last year with this bench and a path, and it's all outlined. Last year we had it all outlined with annuals. If you were here for the open garden, all this gets framed in. We are going to put some sort of tree form thing here, something that's tall and narrow in some way. We might transplant the tree form azalea from the back garden, Encore Azalea, to here. That's a possibility, or don't know yet. But that should kind of finish off this spot with the other annuals and perennials we have. And then this deutzia is just a star here in the garden. That variegation looks great all season. Doesn't need to flower, but it is about to flower. But it's got a couple suckers back here. Steph, you want to come around? And I'll show you what I mean. Basically, a branch on the back of the shrub laid down on the ground, and then it rooted in, and so it's still connected to the parent plant right there. I think you can see that little branch that's under the shovel right there is where it's attached to the parent plant. And because we mulched over a branch, is probably what I did. It probably just had it rooted in, and so I can simply cut that away from the parent plant right there. And now that it's rooted into the ground, I shouldn't have any problem actually just coming right underneath that piece. There you go. Nice new plant. We can either plant this somewhere else in the garden, obviously, or put it in a container, root it out a little bit, give it away, whatever we want to do. But there is opportunity with some of these suckering shrubs. This is a good time of year to be doing it. It's kind of a low, so not the lowest stress time of the year because the plant is trying to put on a little bit of growth, but it's still cool outside. The days aren't 15 hours long yet. And this is a really easy way to make a new plant. And I have a video called The Easiest Way to Propagate Plants, and it's about bending limbs down into containers. So this would have already been rooted into a container, but you can simply do them by laying a branch down, putting some mulch over them, and giving it a little bit of time to root away from the parent plant, and then you just cut it away, and that's actually a pretty nice looking plant. I got a little bit of bark and compost. I'm just gonna plant this Deutzia into that, and I'll fill in. I'll get another little shovelful of it and add it to the top of those roots. But I think we're gonna maybe do a few plants like this, maybe over a couple videos or maybe out of a video. I have no idea. We've got a few other things out here we can do this with right now. I think I'm going to pot up a few of these things and have some of these as the giveaways for the during the open garden, because we last year we gave quite a few plants away, and we will be this year. We've got some. I'm sure we'll have some Southern Living Plant Collection Encore Azaleas as part of it, but also some of the things from the garden here we'll be giving away as well, and then several other giveaways also. What else? Let's see. This dwarf redbud is unbelievable, how well this thing actually flowers. So some of the other, our Golden Falls redbud over there, it just has just a handful of flowers on it, and it's been that way every year. But this one, this is emerald, right? And what's the other one out there called? Amethyst. So this is emerald. Amethyst seems to be a little bit more vigorous here in the garden. It's already about 4 feet out there, and I don't know if that will continue. Sometimes something can jump ahead just because it was happier when it went into the ground. Maybe it was happier in the container, maybe it's happier in the spot it's in, whatever. But right now, this one is the most dwarven of the two of the dwarf redbuds that we have. We had seen these at Danny Warner's years ago when we were filming there, and we didn't film them at the time because they hadn't been introduced yet. But I think these will be finding their way out into the market here over the next few years. But look at the number of flowers on this. This is one of the, some of the other weeping redbuds and some of the other, chartreuse foliage, purple foliage. I'm just not seeing as many flowers on them as we see on just our straight native redbuds. But with this being a big exception to that, leaves are just forming on it, so they'll have that kind of a bit of a burgundy hue to them as they unfold, but then they end up as a perfect heart shape, just like any other redbud, but very much smaller. The leaves are much smaller. Super interesting plant. I'm really liking both of them right now, but again, one is slightly more vigorous out there. And then some daffodils continuing to unfold. Again, look at when you're ordering, a lot of our bulbs came from color blends, but if you're getting them, I don't care if you're getting them from a garden center, box store, mail order, however you're getting them, make sure you're think about making sure you're trying to get some early, mid, and late daffodils, because some of our early daffodils are spent, and the later ones are now kicking in. This one's called Avalanche, and it's perfumey almost to the point of Jim doesn't like super perfumey plants. This one is very fragrant. If you like fragrant plants, this Avalanche daffodil is 100% for you. And it has and rather than having the large, single flowers, it's one of these multis. It has, I don't know how many's on one of these, Steph. How many do you think? It's probably 10 plus, right, on each of these. I don't know if there's an exact number. That would be an interesting thing to count these, if it's the same number every time, but somewhere around 10 on each of those. And again, they're very floriferous and seem very hardy. The ones that we had, these were new this year, but there's another group up front in the front garden that came back bigger, better, fuller, and not 100% of the daffodils have come back bigger, better, fuller this year. There's I think some dryness we had in the fall, drought conditions that we've had through the winter have somewhat stunted them, some of them a little bit, but that one has just, plowed right through that. So that's Avalanche. Again, you can see how sparse the flowers are on this Golden Falls redbud. Of course, it really doesn't need to flower because about 7 or 8 months out of the year, it just, it's beautiful. If you've seen the videos, it's a beautiful backdrop to a lot of what we're doing out here. It's got a lot of crossing branches on it right now, and I need to go through here and thin some of these out, and I'm going to do that. I need to do it before it leaves out. So in the next few days, I'm going to get in here and do that. In the meantime, I'm just going to lift it up off the ground. These weeping redbuds only grow one direction, and they grow very fast. This Golden Falls has got some hybrid vigor in it, and it just, about 3 times a season, we have to lift it up off the ground. It'll grow, this thing will grow. Again, it's not adding any height ever, but I see a big crack right here. You see that? I mean, I just noticing that right there. There's a big giant crack in that branch right there. That whole branch right there is gonna have to come off. That's dead all the way to the bottom. Right there, you see it? I'm gonna go ahead and cut that off in this video while we're talking about it. But we have to lift it up off the ground like 3 times a year. It only grows one direction, down, and it hits the ground and just starts spreading out. And so I just come around, but all of this pruning I'm doing on it is causing all of this extra growth up in here that's now overlapping itself. You know, the more you prune on something, the more, you know, branching you're gonna get, and the more it's going to eventually be an issue. I'll grab a saw and prune that off before we wrap this video up. Pittosporum that's in front of it, this dwarf pittosporum, just gets super wide. It's got a little bit of winter damage on it, and I think a lot of people watching maybe your dwarf pittosporum have some winter damage on them. I will say that the Pittosporum tabira, which is what, you know, this is one of most of the larger leafed Pittosporum that we grow in our gardens. Here in zone 8A, 7B, 8A, they take some winter damage like this, even established. That Pittosporum heterophyllum there'll be a little piece of B-roll here, took 0 damage, and I'm wondering why that plant isn't just overall more widely grown, because I think it's at least a half a zone hardier. I mean, it just winter didn't even happen to it. But this one stung, and I need to get it kind of brought in a little bit anyway. There's a dwarf barberry, a sterile dwarf barberry here that it's invading, perennials that are coming up that it's invading, just all around it. It's being invaded. So this is a good time of year to get in here and just contain the width on this, but at the same time, we're close enough to our average last frost date now that I'm going to go ahead and also tip prune this damaged foliage off of it. If you can come a little closer, stuff, you can see what I'm talking about. Down a little bit further in the plant, it didn't really get stung, but the outer part, you know, took some damage. So that's all I have to do. You know, all I'll do is just clean that off. I don't actually have to, because the new growth will just cover it up. But since I'm out here pruning it and narrowing it in some, I might as well go ahead and take care of that. This plant also has lay down pieces along the ground and is probably rooting in as well. There's probably an opportunity under there somewhere to do the same thing we did on that Deutzia out front. I'm not going to worry about that one. I'll worry about it, or think about it, but there probably is an opportunity. Any of these little low doming plants like this, this material is not diseased. It got winter damage, so it doesn't look its best, but if I want to just leave it here as mulch, I can, or it can be raked up, cleaned up, whatever you want to do. I think you can see the crack in this one, and it's dead. It's cracked further down as well. So it was a pretty major limb up here that died, and I don't know, sometimes you'll get this cracking from moisture being inside of it and then it dropping down and freezing. So we had that in the fall where it stayed warm for a long time, and maybe it didn't pull everything back down in there before that time of year. Maybe it was dead already, because this one drops down inside the plant some. So I may not have seen that it was already dead, and it's just showing itself in the winter time because I can see it. When you get a limb like this that's heavy, it's usually pretty different on other shrubs, but you want to make some sort of back cut before you start, before you cut the top, because if I cut the top here, it has the potential to drop and then crack and then maybe do some damage beyond where it's actually dead. This is a dead branch, and dead branches do not cut as easy as live ones. Not at all. So again, I'm just making a kind of a backstop there for my other cut. Then I come out in front of it and cut it here. This saw has had better days. This little folding saw, but it's the only one I can use, I think, because everything's kind of small up here. Okay, see, and it did break, just like I just said. And that backstop prevented it from doing any damage. You see that? Can you see that on the camera, you think, Steph? Right there. So my backstop was super effective right there. There's an example of it. And now I can come up in here and just make a clean cut with the rest of that without the weight being on it. But there's a pretty big branch in here that was dead all the way to the ground. There's one piece of our red bud gone. I'm wondering what the lifespan of these things are. It's just such a weird growth habit and it grows so fast. I'm just wondering if it has some sort of length of time here that it's actually going to be alive here in the garden. But again, I got to go through here and selectively prune out a few crossing branches, but I'll do that with I think I'll do that with loppers. Maybe we'll do that in the next video before it leaves out. And the few flowers that are coming out on it, I'll let them go ahead and flower, and then I'll thin it out. I've gotten a lot of questions about when to prune off some of the damaged things. Again, you don't have to prune off the damaged stuff. It will just get, a lot of times if it's just damaged on the outside of the plant, the new growth will just cover it up pretty quickly. But this, I needed to rein it in a little bit, so I went ahead and top pruned it a bit as well. The one thing you'll notice is these things pick up speed. You know, as the years go by, that little bit of pruning I just did on it's probably inadequate for this season. It's probably going to try to grow a foot across. So I'm probably going to have to prune it again this year. If I was thinking through this clearly, I would just go back a little narrower with it right now, and then that would give it the whole season to come back out. But I didn't want to take every leaf off of it this morning. Again, this material is not diseased, so it can go either be chop and drop. It can be the mulch under this red bud back here behind it to get rid of it, or it can go in a compost pile. Whatever you want to do with it, it's good material to refeed your plants. But again, I think it is about that moment where, you know, if you've got things you're going to want to clean up, you know, any winter damage on them or anything, it's probably time to go ahead and do that before that new growth starts emerging on them. Unless it's something that flowers, you know, early, and you want to enjoy the flowers on it before you do that, you need to prune after flowering. Another thing that's over on the Weekly Garden Planner is a list of when to prune. This Pittosporum tubera would be on that list. Everything in this garden pretty much would be on that list as to when to prune it during the year to not cost yourself flowers. Wanted to come up the street and do a public service announcement on this weed, which I'm sure in this video is going to be quite beautiful because there is a football field's length of yellow flowers behind me, and it's early in the morning. They're just opening up. These actually fold up at night like tulips and some other flowers. Some of those late winter flowers do that. They fold up, protect themselves during the night, and then they open up during the day. But this is a weed that's going by the common name lesser celandine or pilewort. It's a native to Europe or Western Asia, and it can absolutely take over a space. So this is a spring ephemeral. So it comes up during the winter time is when you start to see the growth on this, and then it flowers here we're filming this in March, usually a little bit earlier than this. You know, it's a little bit late in March right now. And then by June, it just melts back into the ground, basically. But in the meantime, it can sow a lot of seed, as you can see out here, and it's preventing any kind of spring growth from happening on anything else because it's completely covering up the floor here. We've seen this in this is a rental house in the neighborhood. It's slowly but surely taking over this space. Now it's completely taken over this space, and it's well behind the camera as well as we're filming this, and it's jumped to our garden, which is not, you know, up the road, and every other garden here. And I think as people see this, if you had this initially, like the first season, and it was in a little patch like this big, and it was full yellow flower to flower, you might go, wow, that's pretty neat. And then it would produce so much seed that it's just on at that point. It has a pretty good way of protecting itself, so you really can't get in here and dig this out very effectively because it has some stored energy under the ground. Showed it in a video a few weeks ago, digging it up in our garden. But it has these little nodules basically under the ground to store energy. So if you just dig this out, you're not going to get it all. This unfortunately is a spray operation, and that's the way the state of North Carolina is recommending people get rid of it. It's because you need to kill that entire root. Now, the amount of seed bank that's out here is unbelievable. you know, this has been years in the making. And so this is going to be repeated year over year until the seed bank can be reduced in time if it was being maintained at all. There's some reporting places. You can look this weed up online and see if there's a place to report it in your area if you see it. That was the initial strategy, I think, for trying to get some control over this, but control has been at least lost in our neighborhood. And I don't know where, you know, this is just a heck of a lot of seed. And I'm guessing me just walking through this, it's probably in my shoes as well. So be careful if you have it. You're going to end up, you know, the dogs have got seed on them and everything else here as we're standing here. So be thinking about that. We're going to go on a long walk before we go back into our garden for sure. Hopefully get rid of any of it. But this is a pretty tough weed because, you know, a lot of times when we're talking about invasive plants, you know, plants that will seed themselves out into, you know, places where they're not naturally from, they don't do this. This is actually has the potential to really displace native plants, especially spring ephemerals that would be competing with it right now, you know, Trillium or whatever that would be coming up. But anyway, this is lesser celandine, pilewort, several other names it goes by. But if you see this plant, it needs to go away real quick. Make sure you ID it. We do have some native spring ephemerals that kind of look like this, like marshmallow. So don't, you know, identify it and then get rid of it quick. I don't know how much of the color you can see in the flowers on the native redbud, but this is one of the few plants that's actually original to this project, you know, and the last 2 years it's lost massive limbs. In fact, I cut one of the 3 main branches off last year that was dead right here. But this winter coming out, it really doesn't look like it's more than just a couple little pieces up here that have died this winter. But you know, this is the great thing about a redbud, right? I mean, it's blooming. It's blooming on the oldest wood on the tree. The Chinese redbuds even more so. They'll bloom right down to the oldest growth, right at the ground level. But it always amazes me, you know, in these little dormant buds along the stems, you know, you'll get these clusters of flowers. Pollinators absolutely go crazy for this. We're shooting this 8:30 in the morning, something like that, on a partly cloudy kind of morning. It's supposed to be 70 this afternoon. This thing will be covered in bees. And they only have a short time with them, but they'll absolutely be covering it. There's a combo up the street that's one of my favorite things every spring. There's a cherry next to a redbud, and they happen to be timed the exact same time every single year, and it's just a beautiful combo of this kind of pale pink cherry blossom next to a darker pink native redbud. These flowers are edible, which is kind of interesting. You know, I probably should point that out. And a lot of times when I talk about redbuds, I kind of forget to say that the flowers are in fact edible. Of course, fantastic native trees, they do like their roots shaded. And so this is a spot here where the full sun really during the summer is never going to hit the roots on this plant. You'll see them when you're driving along the interstate and you see all the redbuds. They're right on the edge of the woods where they've got their feet down in the shade and the top is out in the full sun. So never really shown this tree off in its full glory. It's in the pea family, and so it forms these little pea pod seed, and I won't be able to grab that, but I'll take a little piece of B-roll. It's still got a few of them from last year. I think you can see right here, but those look like peas, right? and right where those flowers were last year, it reflowered and then formed those little pea pods, which is kind of interesting. But there you go. There's a few things going on in the garden, some pruning, some, you know, literally creating new plants from old plants that are, you know, spreading here in the garden, and we'll give some of those away during the open garden event. You can get those tickets over on the website, HortTube.com. And that's it. Thanks for watching.